If you've been playing games for the last 13 years, you have likely played or at least heard of Terraria. That game that went from defeat the unspeakable horror beneath the planet, to defeat the machines, to defeat the construct, to defeat the eldritch being, and to finally defeat Lightwoman. Yeah, it has a lot of content compared to other sandbox games. Specifically, Vanilla Terraria has 18 non-event bosses, 1 event boss, and 1 secret boss. Alright, so this should summon the secret boss, I think. What the hell is that? What the hell is that? 566 tools and weapons, and in general over 4,000 items. Yes, 4,000. A normal person would look at these numbers and say, I mean, there are enough items and bosses here that there is no need for an expansion. Right? Right? Well... yeah, they added more. Calamity is the Twilight Forest of Terraria, but it has a lot more content than said Twilight Forest. Yes, there are a lot of mods, but we will get to them later, and Calamity makes up 85% of this video, okay? Calamity mod was released in 2016, and at that time it was just a reskin compilation really. There was nothing too special about the mod compared to what it has today. However, it contained the soon-to-be iconic boss, Devourer of Gods, which was just a worm at that time that could just shoot some projectiles, which is a huge difference compared to the Devourer of Gods we have today. As time went on, more bosses were added, like Calamitas, the Plaguebringer Goliath, Cryogen, Yaren, and many more. Now this is where I'll split this section of the video into a few categories. I'll first talk about the bosses, then the items, next the story, yes, story, you heard me right, and finally the community expansions. The bosses of Calamity is where the mod truly shines, and is the reason why I named this video something along the lines of Terraria modding is insane. Normally, Terraria's progression ends with the Moon Lord, and many mods stop there too, but Calamity goes one step ahead and adds post-Moon Lord bosses. These bosses are really good. When I first played Calamity, the quality of these bosses shocked me because I didn't expect such good quality bosses from a Terraria mod. Post-Moon Lord bosses like Yaren, the Devourer of Gods, and Calamitas are unique and don't just leech off of the main game completely. One example of this uniqueness is the second phase of the Devourer of Gods, or Dog fight. When fighting Dog, you kill him and then it revives itself and comes back for an even more intense phase 2, like a Dark Souls boss. This quality isn't limited to post-Moon Lord bosses, even though they are much better than pre-hard mode and early hard mode bosses. But that doesn't mean that those bosses aren't fun. Hard mode bosses like Leviathan and Anahita are actually pretty fun to fight. One thing that cannot be ignored about the bosses of Calamity is the music. Seriously, you would expect such bangers like Infestation, Fly of the Beelzebub, Universal Collapse, Roar of the Jungle Dragon, yes, they actually put lyrics into a Terraria boss's music. And finally, Stained Brutal Calamity. Look, it says the mod's name. The person responsible for these amazing soundtracks is someone named DMDokuro, who doesn't make music for this mod anymore because the fucking Calamity fanbase couldn't stop themselves from sending death threats. A whole video could be made about the bosses and the DMDokuro situation, but I have to move on because I don't want to make this video an hour long. Moving on to the items. Okay, right off the bat, the mod has over 400 weapons. Yeah, not tools, weapons. And most of them are unique like the Flamsteed Ring in the way that they aren't just reskins, because anyone could take a blue katana, color it red, and say, Hey, it's Jetstream Sam's sword from Metal Gear Rising: Revengeance, but that just wouldn't work, so they implemented the sword itself. This brings me to the sheer amount of references that can be found in this mod. I guess not being an actual game developer that has to deal with copyright issues and player complaints meant that they could actually add a shit ton of reference weapons. I'll just mention a few reference weapons here. Gale's Greatsword from Dark Souls 3, Midas Prime, which is a reference to the Piercer from Ultra Kill, and its name, Minos Prime, is also a reference to Ultra Kill. The previously mentioned Murasama from Metal Gear Rising: Revengeance, the Face Slayer, which is a reference to the Crucible Blade from Doom Eternal, and the final reference is Soma Prime from Warframe apparently, but I don't have that many hours in Warframe, so I don't know about this one. Though, don't get it wrong, just because there are a lot of reference weapons, it doesn't mean that the mod doesn't have its own really good unique weapons, like the previously mentioned Flamsteed Ring, which summons a mech suit you can ride, the Cinders of Lament, which summons the two brothers seen in the Calamitas boss fight to rush towards you, damaging both yourself and the enemy, and finally the Scarlet Devil, which is a rogue weapon. Oh yeah, Calamity adds a rogue class, I forgot to mention that. And besides that, it adds two more difficulty options above Master and Expert, Revengeance and Death. Yes, by the way, Revengeance is another Metal Gear reference, and yes, they are both very hard, but they have unique mechanics such as Rage and Adrenaline. These two are bars that build up when you fight enemies, and they both have unique ways as to how they fill up. Rage fills up when you do specific things like dealing true melee damage, and Adrenaline builds up when you manage to not get hit by a boss for some time. They both give damage bonuses when activated. When you think of Terraria, the first thing you'd think about would probably not be the lore. But Calamity adds a lot of lore to Terraria, and it is surprisingly well written. There are multiple gods now, and every boss has their own lore item like Dark Souls. It has a storyline involving a tyrant named Thorium, and it involves almost all of the bosses in the game. The lore is pretty cool, but I can't explain all of it here, so unfortunately I'm not going to. And finally, for Calamity, are the fan expansions for the mod. Before I get into this, I just want to warn you that if you ever want to play Calamity, don't believe anything on the fandom wiki. They have created their own ARG zone. Actually, I want to quickly talk about this. I haven't played Calamity for like 9 months, and when I decided that I want to check the fandom wiki, this happened. We have the Binding of Isaac, the Bronze Wall of Flesh, Yarim Worm, and finally, that guy from the Rumbling. Anyways, there are real fan-made expansions to the mod. I'll mention 2 of them. Calamity Infernum mode, which adds a new mode to the game above Death, and it is called, well, Infernum. It overhauls boss fights and gives them these cool Hollow Knight Radiance-esque titles. It also adds unique arenas for bosses like this. And Calamity Vanities, which does as its name implies, it adds vanity items to Calamity. I talked about Calamity a lot, but I would still like to at least mention some other mods before I end the video, since I try to keep my videos relatively short as of now. And I don't have much experience with other mods, so it would be better to let someone else with more info talk about them. Those honorable mentions are Thorium, which is a classic Terraria mod. In fact, it is the first mod I ever played. It adds a bard class which revolves around instruments alongside a lot of bosses like the Lich and the post-Moon Lord Primordials. The Redemption mod, which adds a huge dungeon called the Abandoned Lab. Seriously, it's huge and you'll have to return to it multiple times when you're playing the game. Alongside this, it also introduces the Druid class and a lot of bosses, some post-Moon Lord. And finally, Fargo's Souls mod. You might know this mod for its overpowered accessories and its difficulty called Masochist. By overpowered I mean you combine almost all of the accessories in Terraria to forge this thing called the Soul of Eternity. Thanks for watching. I hope you enjoyed this video, and if you did, I would really appreciate if you could subscribe. I've had this video idea for ages, but I just couldn't write the script. But I finally managed to, and so you have this video. Goodbye.